Hundreds of President Trump supporters gathered in Washington yesterday for a Stop the Steal rally. But the main event is going to take place in a few hours when the president himself speaks to the thousands of supporters whom he urged to come to Washington to protest his loss to Joe Biden. Police and the D.C. National Guard are on alert because of fears that the demonstrations aimed to try to overturn Biden's victory could turn violent. Authorities in the nation's capital say at least 6 people were arrested yesterday. Back with me, Kimberly Atkins of the Boston Globe, political journalist Jonathan Alter, and Jamil Smith of Rolling Stone. Welcome back to all of you. I don't know, Jamil, you make anything of what's going to go on in Washington tomorrow? As I say, I think that Donald Trump might be trying to incite something here. He has an eager bunch of people who come in from all over the country to do this kind of stuff, but what effect it has in the end, I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, really, we're looking at the new lost cause. I mean, we think back to the lost cause of the Confederacy, and that stemmed out of, the Compromise of 1877, and, white folks feel like they're losing power. They feel like they're being shortchanged when black people are gaining some standing in 12 years after slavery. And I mean, frankly, they say that, history doesn't echo, but it rhymes. And so I think what we need to be considering here is not merely the possibility of violence tomorrow, but also violence ongoing. And how is the government and how are we as a society going to prepare for that?
Kimberly, can Joe Biden do anything about that? Is there a way? I mean, he sort of has this bring down the temperature feel about him, which annoys a lot of progressives. But can he do something here? Can he bring some of this temperature down that Donald Trump raised so at least people can be in conversation about what it is they're complaining about?
I mean, President-elect Biden can certainly speak like a leader. And speak and try to unify a country. That is one of the jobs that we task our leaders with, in being that figurehead and in speaking in a unifying way when the country is going through something difficult. But that's not an easy solution to what we're seeing. I mean, I think Jamil is absolutely right in what we're seeing. And Donald Trump has ginned up this element from within his base in a way that they're not simply going to walk away on January 20th and we won't hear from them again. This is going to be an ongoing part of our society for a while. And we have to think about it in a lot of ways, not just in people not believing in democracy and thinking that an election was stolen, but also the FBI has told us that right-wing extremism is the biggest domestic threat to our country. So the Biden administration is going to have to be focused on that as well and any other violence that might come out of this. But Joe Biden can't do this alone. We need all of our leaders speaking solidly in a unified voice, Democrats and Republicans, saying that the election system is safe, it is fair, people's votes do count, and democracy is strong in order to try to even begin to tamp down this element.
Jonathan Alter, if the lead that Jon Ossoff has at the moment stands, and mathematically it may because the votes we think that are outstanding are from Democratic strongholds. If the Senate becomes 50-50, Democrats essentially have control of it because the vice president is the deciding vote in the Senate. In that instance, does Joe Biden does he benefit from his relationship that, again, upsets a lot of progressives with Mitch McConnell? Mitch McConnell's power drops dramatically, and Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden do actually have a long-standing relationship. Do we see something that looks like functional government over the next 2 years at least?
I think we will, because, once you have the majority, your appointees go through, you don't have these big confirmation fights. You also can get a lot done through this obscure process called reconciliation. So a tremendous amount of legislation will go through, and Joe Biden will have a very eventful and impactful first 100 days. We will get infrastructure. We will get significant COVID relief. We will get political reform. I think a number of these voter suppression tactics will be banned by federal law. And if they have to suspend the filibuster for the purpose of democracy promotion, the Democrats will do that. They won't get rid of the filibuster altogether, but there will be big change. This is a big moment in American history, Allie. Biden would have been hamstrung if Georgia had gone a different way. McConnell would have shown him no mercy despite their long relationship. But now McConnell is basically stripped of most of his power. Politics in this way is a little bit like sports. It's a game of inches. And the Democrats will now, at least for the next 2 years, they will be in the driver's seat. Will they get everything they want? Well, no. Will the progressives be disappointed? Yes, because the filibuster still will prevent a number of things from going through. But it will be a much, much more historic period, and people will see forward progress because of what happened in Georgia tonight. And just one quick word about John Ossoff. History was made with Raphael Warnock, also with John Ossoff, the first Jewish senator from Georgia. He will be the youngest senator by almost 10 years. And he ran an almost flawless campaign. So this is a real leader for the future. You're going to be hearing a lot about John Ossoff in the years ahead.
Not everybody would have known he was Jewish if Purdue hadn't sort of gone at him with a few anti-Semitic ads that caused him to actually come out and discuss it. An interesting way to get about figuring something out about someone. Jamil, one of the things that would have kept the Democratic Party, which has its own issues, united, was facing a united Republican Senate. What happens now if it becomes 50-50? And we're not there yet. We don't know what will happen with Ossoff and Purdue. He's leading right now, but it's not called. So it could be a 50-50 Senate, in which case Democrats have control. Does that cause the Democratic Party a couple more problems because it's got to actually now decide on its priorities because it's going to get to pass bills?
Well, I think they should have expected this, to be frank. I mean, if you see what, as Kim mentioned, what Stacey Abrams and LaTosha Brown and other activists have been doing in Georgia and how they have taken this approach that we're going to turn out the people who are already on our side as opposed to trying to, get Obama Trump voters, they should have expected this and should have been planning for this. And frankly, they should act like they have a mandate because frankly, they do. I mean, 80 million people voted for Joe Biden. You have 2 Democratic senators in Georgia. At what point do you act like you belong there? At what point do you act like you're in charge instead of trying to negotiate with people who, have promoted nothing but hatred and lies about you? I mean, frankly, the country needs leadership. The country needs competent governance. And there's frankly only one party that seems interested in doing that.
Kimberly, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has asserted itself quite strongly in recent weeks. They made it very clear that they gathered around Joe Biden, who's not necessarily the first choice of a lot of progressives, but they gathered around him, rallied the troops to win. It wasn't like 2016 where a number of progressives sat on their hands, and they would like a little payback for it.
Yeah, the Democrats that I talk to don't really word it in terms of payback, but word it in a way that, look, the voters who elected Joe Biden had these issues that drove them to the polls. This is what they went and voted in the middle of a pandemic in order to ensure. They wanted relief from this pandemic. They want a restoration of voting rights. They want climate change to be addressed. They certainly want criminal justice reform to be addressed. And so they are looking for action on that in meaningful ways, something beyond just forming commissions and coming up with recommendations. So I think that is where we're really seeing a lot of the energy when it comes to progressives. Joe Biden is somebody who has, over his career moved in at a slower pace, in a very deliberate, slower way. But at this moment in time, with all of the issues that voters are that America is facing and what sent voters to the poll, there's really an urgency there. That I think Joe Biden is going to be reminded about by the folks within his own party moving forward.
Thank you to the three of you for joining me this morning. It is an historic and exciting night. Kimberly Atkins, Jonathan Alter, Jamil Smith, I appreciate your time so early in the night or late in the night or early in the morning. I don't even know what it is right now, but thanks for joining me today. Since Donald Trump lost the election, he has called for Georgia's Republican governor to resign. He's told Georgia's Republican Secretary of State that he was breaking the law simply for refusing to actually break the law and find thousands of votes for Donald Trump. The growing Republican divide is going to be on full display today when Congress certifies Joe Biden's victory. The Associated Press reports the nearly 167-year-old party is divided over the typically mundane congressional certification of President-elect Joe Biden's Electoral College victory. The process is opening a schism between those wanting to honor Democratic norms and those who want to stay in lockstep with President Trump out of hopes of avoiding his wrath and inheriting his supporters. Joining me now is Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, former political strategist for President George W. Bush and Senator John McCain. Reed, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. There's a lot of calculus going on with these 13 senators and senators-to-be who have decided to object to the certification of the vote. A, they've got to realize it's not going to work. B, they're doing it to stay in Donald Trump's good books. We don't know how good those books are. And C, some of them want to be president.
Yeah, and I think that the Venn diagram of those things really comes together with most of these 13 folks. And I think what you're going to see tomorrow or today, whatever time it is, as you said, Allie, is that these folks have decided that it's more important to preserve their own ambition and their own optionality than it is to stand with the Constitution. And I think that, you know, we as the Lincoln Project are going to make sure that every American knows where these folks stood when the time came. And so, yeah, you're right. Look, I mean, the thing we should understand about Donald Trump is that he's going to lose tomorrow again. Yeah. He's going to leave office on January 20th. And that might be it for his presidency. But, you know, he and his family and the ongoing criminal concern that it is, own most of the Republican National Committee, lock, stock, and barrel, most of the state parties, most of the apparatus. He may not be much of a planner, but he's got people around him that are. And so I think that, you know, some of these folks, their political concerns may be legitimate, but that does not at all excuse the fact that these people are doing something that they know is fundamentally wrong.
You know, there have always been schisms in major political parties. We had the Tea Party and we had the Freedom Caucus, and we were just talking about some of the schisms in the Democratic Party. There's nothing wrong with these schisms. But sure, somewhere along the lines, the Republican Party became detached from principled conservatism. There are lots of principled conservatives whom I meet out there who really want to have great discussions, ideological discussions about approaches to important things in society, but that's not what they're seeing amongst these 13 who are representative of a much larger group of Republicans.
Sure, and remember that it's not just the 13 members of the United States Senate. It's right, more than half of the Republican House conference. So, yeah, I mean, it does make up a majority of you know, Republicans in Washington anyway at this point. And they probably represent more than half of Republican primary electorates around the country. And so what I think you're seeing is that these folks are now part of the authoritarian wing of the Republican Party versus the establishment wing that has been in retreat probably since, obviously, Donald Trump came on the scene and is very much in peril now. So we should not be under any illusion that a lot of the senators and a lot of House members are doing this because they're positive that they're going to get a primary challenge next year. As you heard Trump say the other night, he's going to take on Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia. He's probably going to try and take on John Thune, the senator from South Dakota. And so, again, it's not that his wrath isn't real. It's the fact that they have decided that putting the country behind their ambition, that they have all of this desire with no conviction, is somehow okay. And, you know, that piece you showed by the AP, I think, you know, is somehow mystifying. The idea that there's any choice between Donald Trump and the future of the country, that somehow any of this is going to go down like that Donald Trump wants it to. He sends out this tweet basically saying, well, Mike Pence can do this. No, he can't. And Trump knows that. All his lawyers know that. And, of course, now what we're seeing is that we have an establishment piece of the party that was too bereft, as you mentioned, of principle, and has now been laid bare by Trump. And too many of them have stayed too silent for too long. And they think somehow that that's going to make them okay, that's going to serve them well. And then you have people like Pauley and Cotton and Cruz and all these other folks who think that somehow Donald Trump's going to go away and just, you know, lay out the red carpet for him to, you know, for this one of them or another to be, you know, the heir apparent to his presidency. And he's not going to let them do that. He just can't possibly allow it. So I think that all of these have made yet another devil's bargain for Donald Trump. And I think it's ultimately going to be bad for the country.
I got 30 seconds left, but for that establishment wing who realized it wasn't doing the right thing, do they regenerate as something? Is there a phoenix from the ashes here?
Well, they have to figure out what it is they believe in, and they have to figure out whether or not they care about democracy and what it means to be an American first. And I don't know that any of them have figured that out yet. I don't think that any of them have understood how it is that they have to fight these folks. I mean, look, we understood when we decided that we were going to take on Donald Trump, that once in a while you've got to go toe-to-toe with the biggest bully in the barnyard. And from our perspective, that's what these other folks are going to do, yet they have not, A, decided that they can do that, and B, decided that they will do that. And until and unless they do that, they're going to start losing in droves next year.
Reed Galen, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining me this morning. Reed Galen is with the Lincoln Project. Up next, my thoughts on Reverend Warnock's historic win.
Struggling take. Whether you voted for me or not, know this. I hear you. I see you. And every day I'm in the United States Senate, I will fight for you.
56 years since General William Sherman and 60,000 Union soldiers captured Savannah. Sherman's march to the sea devastated both the Confederacy and much of Georgia. Sherman reaching Savannah was the beginning of the end of the Civil War. Now, until Sherman's arrival, Savannah was a horrible Confederate bastion of slavery. Just 5 years prior to that, the city was the scene of one of the largest sales of enslaved persons in American history. 436 men, women, and children were brought to a Savannah racetrack just 2 miles from downtown and put in stalls used for horses, where they waited for days and in some cases even weeks. Hotels in town filled with potential slave buyers from across the region. The event became known as the Weeping Time because the skies poured rain for 2 days as enslaved families were torn apart to help settle their owners' gambling debts. News of the horrific auction deepened the nation before the Civil War. Now, today that racetrack is long gone. Savannah is a very different place. The population, now 54% black, and dotting the city are reminders of its hidden history. In Savannah, there's a marker dedicated to the Weeping Time auction, and in some of the beautiful antebellum homes, the former living quarters of slaves serve as a physical reminder of the divide between the most and the least powerful. Right now, one of Savannah's own, Reverend Raphael Warnock, is making history by becoming Georgia's first African-American senator and only the 11th black senator in American history. Warnock's feat is all the more impressive considering Georgia's adoption of runoff elections, which were specifically designed to limit the political participation of black people. Warnock, with the help of people like Stacey Abrams and Latasha James, has worked hard to mobilize Georgia's black community. Racial progress has been slow in that state, but the fact that 156 years ago, a black man in Savannah had little agency over his own life, and now a black man from Savannah is going to be elected a United States senator, is another chapter in that state's remarkable history. I want to thank you so much for watching this morning's special, which continues right here on MSNBC. Good morning to you. I'm Ali Velshi at MSNBC headquarters in New York. It is 2 a.m. in Atlanta, and the Democrats are on the brink of retaking control of the United States Senate for the first time in 6 years, which could help President-elect Joe Biden as he seeks to enact his agenda. Moments ago, NBC News projected that the Reverend Raphael Warnock has won the seat that Republican Kelly Loeffler was appointed to just 1 year ago. Here's what Warnock had to say a short time ago about his victory.
May my story be an inspiration to some young person who is trying to grasp and grab hold of the American dream. And so, Georgia, I am honored by the faith that you have shown in me. And I promise you this tonight. I am going to the Senate to work for all of Georgia.
The race between Warnock and Loeffler has been decided. NBC News says the race between Democrat Jon Ossoff and Republican Senator David Perdue remains too close to call. Ossoff has taken a slight lead, and his campaign has issued a statement essentially declaring victory. Nearly all of the vote is now in, a far cry from November, where it took more than a week to count all of the votes. The Georgia Secretary of State's office says there have been no reports of major issues with voting. So I want to get started with a look at the very latest results from Georgia, and you all know what that means. I almost feel like not having to say it. Here we go. The one and only Steve Kornacki at the big board. Sir, take it away.
Well, Allie, we've been telling a story all night about, Warnock getting the lead. It feels, 3-4 hours ago, something like that, and then slowly building a lead. And we knew that what was going to happen sometime in these overnight hours was we were going to get a significant update from right here in DeKalb County, just outside. Actually, some of Atlanta is in DeKalb County, Atlanta, and just outside Atlanta. Overwhelmingly Democratic county. So they had, as of about 10 minutes ago, there were about 20,000 votes left to be counted in this county. We got about 6,000 of them in, and Warnock won 91% of them. Ossoff also won 91% of them. I mean, this is just an overwhelmingly Democratic county. And so that just pushed the Warnock lead up to a full point statewide, over 40,000 votes. It just reached the point where there's no conceivable way that Kelly Loeffler is going to catch Raphael Warnock. And also, Warnock is going to be clear. We can show you on the statewide result here, is going to be clear, it looks like, of that recall. But, I say recall, recount. If you're within half a point statewide, there could be a recount. It's now up to a full point. There are still votes left to be counted, reported out in DeKalb County, maybe coming overnight. Any votes that come out of DeKalb County still, and there's more than 10,000 of them, are only going to pad Warnock's lead over Loeffler. Also, in the other race you mentioned, it vaulted, that update from DeKalb County, it vaulted Jon Ossoff ahead of David Perdue. Now a 3,560 vote lead for Ossoff over Perdue. And this is where it gets critical. We know Warnock has won the first race. The only question there is the margin. What about this one? Where is this race going from here? Ossoff finally has the lead. Well, again, DeKalb County, probably about 12,000 votes left to come in DeKalb County. We're expecting them to be probably like we just saw, probably something like 90% Democratic. So it is a reasonable expectation that when all of the vote comes in from DeKalb County, again, it may be happening sometime in these overnight hours, that Ossoff margin from the vote just in DeKalb County can climb over 10,000 votes statewide, maybe over about 12,000 votes statewide. Where else are we still waiting on votes in Georgia? The other big source of it is right next door. There's DeKalb here and there's Fulton here. This is Atlanta area. This is the biggest county in the state. They have all of the votes that were cast in person on Election Day are counted. All of the early votes are counted. The only thing left in Fulton County are 7,500 mail ballots. And they are, we talked to election officials there in the last hour. They told us they are not going to be released. The numbers from those 7,500 mail ballots will not be released until likely tomorrow afternoon, right? I say tomorrow, I guess later today afternoon. So it is going to be a while till those votes get reported out. But we know what they are. They are mail ballots in an overwhelmingly Democratic county. You can certainly expect these are going to be a heavily Democratic group of votes. So between what is still to come in DeKalb County, about 12,000 votes there in DeKalb, overwhelmingly Democratic, 7,500 mail ballots in Fulton County, heavily Democratic, you can certainly see Jon Ossoff building the statewide lead that now sits at 3,560. You could certainly see him building that 15,000, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood. One other place where we think there might be some outstanding mail ballots is down by Savannah. Maybe again, Ossoff could add another 1,000 or so there. But that's, but the name of the game for Ossoff now is just to try to get that margin up as much as he can. Is he going to end up over Perdue? Is he going to end up less than half a point ahead? If he does indeed end up ahead, is it going to be less than half a point ahead? Keep that in mind, because anything inside of a half a point, you can have the recount. So that could happen. So we want to see, there's certainly momentum here for Ossoff to build on this. Does he build it enough to get out of that half a point zone? I think that's maybe some of the suspense right now. But you just look at what's left You look at what we just saw happen in DeKalb, you can kind of forecast, Allie, where this is going in this race. You can see where Ossoff is going to build on this. The question is when. Are we going to get more DeKalb County votes overnight tonight? Is that not going to be till tomorrow? And again, we know that big batch of votes, 7,500 of them in Fulton, we know that's not till tomorrow afternoon.
So let's talk about this a little Kornacki math. About 49,000 votes in total outstanding in Georgia. But let's just go to DeKalb County for a second. Your guess, roughly 12,000 votes remaining there. The split we've seen so far has been about 90% Democrat to about 10% Republican. So if it's 12,000 votes outstanding, we call that about 10,800 for Ossoff, about 1,200 for Perdue. You subtract one from the other, it gives Ossoff a net 9,600. He's got 3,500. So that puts him up about 1,300 in DeKalb County alone. But because this is so tight, and because there are 49,000 votes somewhere outstanding in Georgia, does that put us into the category at that point, once we get those final votes from DeKalb, to be able to make a call that John Ossoff has this race?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to, I always caution, and people are probably sick of it, I don't want to speak for the decision desk, but I think, there is DeKalb. As I say, there's Fulton, there's Savannah, and I can remember there was, you think back to Pennsylvania. Remember Pennsylvania in November? It seemed the decision desk wanted to see Joe Biden not just get ahead of Trump in the statewide count in Pennsylvania. What triggered that call eventually was that Biden got half a point ahead of Trump. It was 0.5%. And then that was sort of the decision desk here and elsewhere, because all of the decision desks from different networks basically called the presidential race at the same point. That 0.5%, when Biden got ahead 0.5, and it was clear the only stuff to come was only going to add to that, that's when the trigger was pulled. So you've got right now statewide Ossoff just inching into the lead right now, 3,500. Again, if you extrapolate like you just did what's to come from DeKalb, okay, maybe he's sitting at about a 13,000 vote lead. It's still, in the grand scheme of things, relatively narrow. Remember, Biden's margin in the state was about 12,000. So Ossoff's margin would resemble Biden's margin. That would be in the recount zone potentially. So yeah, I think you might be a little closer than we've seen in some of these other places. But again, it's if you see where it's going.
Do you have everything you're pointing to where we're still looking for ballots seem to be places where the balloting is skewing toward Democrats? There were, I know, at least an hour and a half ago, you were looking at some counties. They were not particularly large. Right. There's some counties in northern Georgia and others where we were still expecting votes that would skew Republican. Are we still looking for those?
Yeah, so what's left, basically, I'm giving you the biggest places that we're aware of that are left. DeKalb, Fulton, and Chatham County. Even in these red counties, we're seeing, mail votes get reported out in some of these red counties where the Democrats are actually getting more votes in the mail vote. So you don't really see a huge source of Republican. So you don't really see a huge source of Republican votes that's left here.
Postal.
Yes, the mail. Right. Yes, U.S. mail votes. So look, it's these three that we're talking about, plus 17,000 military votes. That's not something that's going to get done tonight. Plus a certain number of provisional ballots. And these are, it's going to take a few days before they go through to provisional ballots. How many of those are there? There were 10,000 in November. It'll be short of that, we think. Let's say maybe 8,000. That seems a reasonable guess. The provisional ballots, we saw them break 2-1 for the Democrats back in November. It's a pretty good rule of thumb for these things. So there's a group of about 8,000 provisional ballots we think will go overwhelmingly, heavily Democratic. There's these three counties where we think Democrats are positioned to do very well with what's left. And there are 17,000 military ballots. And Georgia does not release the results specifically of the military ballots. But again, I think, look, if you're putting the military ballots together with the provisional ballots, I think that's probably worst case for Democrats. There's a wash.
Right. Okay, Steve. We're going to stay close to you. What are you expecting? Do you know what we're getting in the next hour or two?
I am glued to every report you've had on from Priscilla Thompson, because I know she's there in DeKalb County, and I'm as eager as anybody to hear what she's hearing, because look, we know we're not getting Fulton tonight. We know we're not getting anything else from Chatham County tonight, because we know the officials there have gone home. So if we're getting anything more substantial tonight, it's going to be from DeKalb County. It's going to be that 12,000 or so votes outstanding there. Clearly, this is an 85 and 90% Democratic vote that's left there. Are we getting another update? Are we going to get all of it tonight, or is that going to be sometime tomorrow? That seems to be the overnight drama here, I would say.
We're going to be talking to Priscilla in just a couple of minutes, but she was reporting that there was a technical glitch with one of their memory cards, so that they are scanning 19,000 ballots manually. That process is ongoing. They hope to have them done tonight. Do you believe that group of votes you just got from DeKalb includes that, or is that separate?
Yeah, I believe what we just got was a portion of that 19. I think we got about a third of that 19,000. Right. So when I'm saying about 12,000 left, my understanding of it is that we got a chunk of it, but not about a third of it.
Okay, don't go far. I know that's not really a problem for you, but do not go far. Steve Kornacki, we're going to need to talk a lot over the next few hours. Steve Kornacki staying with me here in the studio at 30 Rock as we finish this off. I've made some determination to try and end this before I get off the air tonight. Joining me now, I might have just cursed it, by the way. Joining me now is David Corn. He's the Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones, Olivia, News East Washington correspondent for New York Magazine, Kurt Bardella, senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. Welcome to all three of you to this remarkably exciting night. Usually when they tell you need to be on TV at 2 in the morning, you think you're doing the graveyard shift. There's nothing graveyardy about it tonight. We are looking for the end of this thing. Olivia, to you, what do you make of what you've seen so far tonight?
One of the most interesting things to me so far is that some areas where there is typically high Republican turnout that went very heavily for the president during the general election have had lower turnout on Tuesday. And to me, I mean, this is kind of a repeat of the same problem that Trump had on election day, where when you spend months talking about an election being rigged, talking about it being unfair, the result might be that you depress turnout among your most loyal supporters who hang on your every word and believe everything you have to say. And it also says to me that even though people might believe Donald Trump, even though they might come out to a rally for him, as they did this week, it doesn't mean that they're going to do what he says. And I think that going forward into a post-Trump era, it's instructive to look at the results here, look at enthusiasm from the president's base, and apply it to how seriously we should take him and his family and MAGA politicians in the future.
David, I have to tell you, we have seen this week, and I'm curious because Donald Trump just went to Georgia last night to campaign for these Republicans, and it's not clear, if you look at the numbers as to where it was, it's not clear that he actually helped. And writ large, it's not clear that the things he's been up to in the last couple of weeks, the fighting of the election, the declaring of the actual runoffs, which have just taken place tonight as illegitimate ahead of the time, and then that remarkable recording with Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State for Georgia. At some juncture, one wonders how this ever helps Donald Trump and whether it actually did in this case.
Well, nothing's helped Donald Trump. He lost the election. He lost the election largely because he refused to manage the pandemic effectively, as you've well covered throughout the year, and he has become a candidate of delusions. I mean, last night when he was in Georgia, it was not talking about the assets and the wonderful qualities of the Republican candidates who are on the ballot today. He was talking about delusional conspiracy theories and allegations of fraud that are baseless. And yeah, that works with his base, right? But what we've seen in Georgia, what we saw in the Biden victory there, what we've seen after 10 years of Stacey Abrams organizing on the ground, is that base, gets Trump a long way, gets the Republican Party a long way, but it also, what appeals to it is turning off people in the suburbs, and also motivating other people to come out and vote. It's a double whammy that Trump has. So he talks about these great crowds he has, but that's kind of it. The people who are with him are very enthusiastic about him, not about the Republican Party or anyone else. And he thinks that's how you win a ball game, but it really isn't. You got to put points on the board, and he can't do anything other than focus ultimately on his own grievances and his own psychological need for a narrative that shows he didn't lose. And that didn't get enough, Georgia Republican voters to the polls. And it's amazing what the turnout was. It was pretty high, close to the general election turnout. And both Ossoff and Warnock did better than they did last time out. They got more votes in a lot of ways. So Trump hurt himself, hurt the party, and he's going to continue to do this tomorrow, the next 3 weeks, and probably in the next 3 years.
Kurt Bardella, former Republican, talk to me about what happened here in Georgia. This sort of long stopped being a Republican versus Democrat thing in Georgia. It became a referendum on everything that was going on the Senate, on federal politics, on Perdue and Loeffler, who are the richest senators. They're two of the richest senators a lot. Loeffler is in a whole different field of her own. She's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They were involved in stock trading. This was not a battle of ideology, Democratic versus liberal ideology, or conservative versus liberal ideology.
Yeah, well, and I think this is really the first time I can think of in my lifetime, certainly, where the platform that the Republican candidates ran on was one of against democracy. And the one thing that we knew from a messaging standpoint for both Loeffler and Perdue was that the litmus test seemed to be, do you believe that Joe Biden won the election or not? And over and over and over again, they refused to acknowledge that reality. And David was right that this was a campaign about conspiracy theories. And as it turns out, the combination of running a campaign based solely on pure folly, fiction, conspiracy theories, running a campaign solely on the idea of undermining the democratic process is not a winning formula. And I hope that all of the Republicans who are going to consider what they're going to do today in deciding whether they're going to object to the Electoral College proceedings in the Congress, I hope they take a good look at what's happening right now, because the voters did not respond to this. And this wasn't some left-wing liberal state here. This is Georgia. And when you can't get Georgia to come with you on that message, the Sedition Caucus, the Jim Crow Caucus, they need to take a deep look at what happened here, because they are setting up the Republican Party for electoral failure after electoral failure if they keep going down this road. When you look at the coalition that has led to these apparent victories tonight, you have amazing turnout from African Americans in Georgia. You have depressed turnout from Republicans. That is an unsustainable formula for the Republican Party to continue, and for the party having it split down the middle, where one side acknowledges reality and the other side doesn't. That's irreconcilable. That is an unsustainable path forward, and Republicans need to really reevaluate what their strategy is going forward. Because I'll tell you, when they cast those votes today, in Congress, in the House and Senate, and whether they object to the Biden certification or not, that is doubling down on failure if they proceed with that plan.
Olivia Nuzzi, 10 hours, less than 10 hours to when this thing, I don't even know what you call it anymore, starts in the United States Congress. It used to be a thing, we didn't even have a name for it, because it used to be a thing that nobody paid any attention to. It is this pro forma thing, literally, where they count the Electoral College votes that have been cast, and the vice president signs it, and that's the end of it. Most Americans didn't know this even happened. But it's 10 hours to this. There are 12 or more Republican senators who are in some fashion or other going to try and stand in the way of the certification of the election of Joe Biden. We're not quite sure what Mike Pence is going to do about this. Does tonight's result have any impact on what happens tomorrow?
Well, as you were saying, a lot of Americans probably were not aware of this formality previously. So if there is an upside to the president attempting to subvert democracy, perhaps it's a civics lesson, and we're all getting to learn about aspects of the process that we might not have otherwise paid attention to. But as to whether or not this affects things, I think perhaps it'll be an indication to Republicans who haven't made up their minds yet, or who maybe were on the fence about trying to support this attempted, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's not going to be a reversal of what happened on Election Day. Maybe they will think twice in light of these results, but this has all been just symbolic. And so I don't really think that there's going to be a big change. And I don't think that the president is going to wake up in the morning, or he's watching television right now, and say, oh, I guess this is it. I guess this is a bad indication for me. He is who he is. He's trying to keep his options open. He is looking ahead to what's next for Donald Trump. He obviously has never had any real interest in governing. He's barely had any interest in the party in general, or in any down ballot races. We heard on that call that he sounded, if anything, quite frustrated that Republicans had success across the board, but that he had not been reelected. And I think a lot of Republicans have miscalculated what the future is going to look like, where they think that they are going to be able to continue to appeal to the president's base and benefit from that. But in a post-Trump world, when him and his keyboard are further and further removed from the levers of power, I think it's going to be not quite as important to avoid becoming the subject of an angry presidential tweet. And I think that there will be a reckoning of sorts, and Republicans looking back with regret and perhaps embarrassment, and they should, over how they've indicated that they're going to behave during Wednesday's ceremony, I guess we're calling it.
It is kind of incredible. And I see Steve, from the corner of my eye, I see Steve Kornacki heading back toward the big board. I'm going to take a guess there that means he may have some information. Do you, Steve?
I do. I don't.
He doesn't have a mic. Kornacki, he took his mic off. I didn't even know that happens. I didn't know. I thought Steve had one of those mics that's just sort of somehow in his aura or in his glasses or something like that. We're going to get a mic on Steve because Steve's actually in the house. Go ahead and take a look, take a shot of that. This is how the magic happens over here. Steve Kornacki. I sort of thought that Steve just sort of talks and it gets on TV, but there's actually a microphone he's about to put on. He's going to give us a little more information. I will tell you before Steve gets on here what we're looking at. We have about 97%, 98% of the vote in Georgia. If you look at it that way, there's still about 49,000 votes outstanding somewhere in Georgia. Some of them are mail ballots. Some of them are provisional ballots that were cast before the elections. Some of them are military ballots, about 17,000 of them. And we keep on hearing from some counties who are saying they're coming in, they're doing some work tonight, they're doing some work overnight, some tomorrow. This is the race we're looking at. Ossoff and Perdue. We already called the Warnock race. Reverend Raphael Warnock has defeated Senator Kelly Loeffler, but we are still in a tight race with Ossoff and Perdue. You can see there that John Ossoff has the lead in there, 50.1% to 49.9%, a difference of about 9,500 votes. Now, we are still in just one county in the Atlanta area. Remember, in Atlanta, there are 8 or 9 counties right in the Atlanta metropolitan area, heavily populated, heavily Democratic. In one of those counties, DeKalb County, we are expecting probably another 12,000 votes before we're done there. And those votes are breaking about 90% Democratic to about 10% Republican. So we expect in that county and in other areas around Athens, around Savannah, there are things to come in. But this is DeKalb County. This is what we're looking at. Breaking 83-17 at the moment. Let's see what Steve Kornacki has now that he's got his mic.
Sorry about that, Ali. I apologize. Yes, so, I mean, statewide, this is a key development. John Ossoff took the lead the last time we got an update from DeKalb County. Now John Ossoff is building on that lead. You can see it was about 3,000 in the last update. Now it's up, getting close to 10,000 votes. So again, getting more in from DeKalb County, working our way towards all of those. It's the early vote. That is what has been outstanding here in DeKalb County for some time now. The votes that were cast in person at polling places, but before Election Day, a week before, 2 weeks before, they have that early voting period. You heard a lot about it. Democrats were excited about the turnout numbers they were getting. Well, in DeKalb County, they are still releasing the votes that were cast, the totals from the votes that were cast in that early voting period. That's the outstanding piece of business in DeKalb County. And again, we said with each update you're going to get from DeKalb County, that Ossoff advantage statewide is going to grow. So now it's approaching 10,000 votes. And again, you can just compare that. Warnock's lead, meanwhile, is going to start approaching 50,000 votes statewide over Loeffler. We know Warnock's won. Here's Ossoff. Again, he's building a lead. The margin here for Joe Biden won this state in November over Donald Trump. Joe Biden's margin was just shy of 12,000 votes. So Jon Ossoff is now within about 3,000 votes in his margin, excuse me, about 2,000 votes in his margin of where Joe Biden finished in the state when he won it. And again, there are still, you can expect what you just saw twice in the last 20 minutes. You can expect another batch from DeKalb County that will push that higher for Ossoff. You can expect probably tomorrow afternoon another batch from Fulton County that would push it higher still. And then we believe there's a couple thousand votes down by Savannah, mail votes, Democratic County, mail-in ballot votes. So you can expect, again, that's going to pad it further. This Ossoff lead really does look like it's going to be above, significantly above where Joe Biden finished in this state back in November. So again, when you get through everything I'm just describing, a couple days from now, there's still the issue of provisional ballots, still the issue of military ballots. Again, worst case for Democrats, those probably work out to a wash, but those are some other votes to keep in mind. And I think the bottom line you got to be thinking about here is how big is Ossoff's advantage over Perdue going to be when all of the votes are counted? And I say that because, look, it is right now 50.1 to 49.9, 0.2%. In Georgia, anything inside of half a percent, anything inside of 0.5%, 0.5 inside of that's recount territory. So Ossoff's got it up to 0.2 right now, and the opportunity to build it. Can he get it up? Can he get it out of that recount zone? I think that's one of the other questions right here. Or does it stay there, and then, when all the votes are counted, you got to go through the whole recount process as well. But it really is looking like this is just a question of how high, with the vote we know is outstanding, how high does Ossoff build that lead?
Let me ask you this. In the general election on November 6th, November 3rd, Perdue outperformed Donald Trump in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And at this rate, he's not.
No, and this race here, Perdue versus Ossoff was essentially a one-on-one race back in November. As a libertarian candidate that got a very, very small amount of the vote, ended up keeping each candidate under 50%. That's why we're in a runoff. David Perdue got 49.7%. Back in the preliminary election, he's at 49.9, but the difference was Perdue, back in November, got 88,000 more votes than Ossoff. Ossoff lagged Biden. Perdue outperformed Trump. That was one of the reasons Republicans came into these runoffs so confident in Georgia was, yes, Joe Biden won the state. He beat Donald Trump in Georgia. But Republicans could say, and did say for the last 2 months, Perdue got more votes than Ossoff. Biden won the state by 12,000, but Perdue got 88,000 more votes than Ossoff. And then if you looked at that other race here that turned into, how does this selected? When you look at the other race here, Warnock versus Loeffler, if you added up all the Democrats, all the Republicans back in November in that wide open primary, there were more Republican votes. So Republicans were very confident. They said, well, Trump may not be able to win the state, but a Republican Senate candidate can win the state. And you see, Ossoff has improved significantly over what he did back in November. And Warnock not only has consolidated the Democratic vote that existed in his race back in November, he's built on it.
Keep it on the Warnock-Loeffler race and take me to Chatham County, if you would, please. Chatham County is Savannah. The reason this is interesting is not just that there may be some votes outstanding. You can tell us if there are. Raphael Warnock is a son of Savannah.
And we do think there are outstanding votes here. We know that the election officials in Chatham County are done for the night. We believe our decision desk does that there's about 3,000 mail-in ballots, still to be counted in Chatham County. And yeah, you can see, it's a little bit more than half a point, but Warnock right now is running better than Biden did. Slightly, but he is running better than Biden did in Chatham County. And again, with a little bit of mail vote left to come, that's usually the strongest vote that Democrats have. So I think there's the opportunity, certainly, for Warnock in Chatham County to push that vote a little higher. For that matter, there's the opportunity, again, for Ossoff to do the same. So, again, any votes that come in, any mail votes that come in from Chatham County, tomorrow, and it would be tomorrow, I think this would happen, are going to favor the Democrats and are going to pad. Each one's leading now. They will lead by more when those votes are counted.
And when you look at the difference in performance right now between Ossoff and Warnock. Part of that is, I was pointing out that Warnock is from Savannah. It was 156 years ago that William Sherman went into Savannah, and it was the beginning of the end of the Civil War. Georgia has not had a black senator ever. There have only been 3, I think, black senators from the South, and he will be the 11th black senator in all of U.S. history. So there's a certain wind in his sails that is a little bit different than John Ossoff's.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we're going to talk about, Ali, too, is the ingredients that went into Warnock winning and potentially Ossoff winning, potentially Democrats sweeping this. Yet Warnock consistently has run about a half a point above Ossoff. He has 50.1 for Ossoff right now, 50.5 for Warnock, 0.4 of 1 point. And again, we've been trying to look at this. Is there a geographical component? Is it a certain part of the state? It's been pretty consistent, has been what I think I've been seeing here. County after county, Warnock is just doing a little bit better than Ossoff did. Is that about Warnock and Ossoff? Is it about voters perceiving some kind of a difference there? Is it about Perdue and Loeffler? Just some voters just perhaps like Perdue as a candidate a little bit more than they like Loeffler as a candidate. Maybe that's the way to look at it. But whatever it is, Warnock is running a little bit ahead of Ossoff in this. And I think one of the most striking things when I say things we'll be discussing in the aftermath of these elections is we heard from Democrats for the last few weeks as this early voting period took shape that they believed they had found new voters who hadn't participated in the November election, specifically African-American voters. They believed they were going to do better, turn out more black voters, particularly in sort of a band of rural counties, a lot of rural counties here, outside of Columbus. Albany, Georgia's down here, southwest Georgia, a lot of counties down here, and kind of a band stretching across, south and east of Macon all the way up to the Augusta area. They thought in the early voting, and they were saying, we found new voters, new black voters who are turning out for this runoff. And we weren't sure coming into today, is that real or not? And one of the stories we saw tonight in these heavily black, largely black rural counties, we saw Democrats doing better. We saw Warnock and Ossoff both doing better than Biden had back in November. And we saw turnout. When you were looking at the turnout compared to the November election, it was holding up better in a lot of these counties I'm describing than other counties, particularly in the core Republican part of the state. So I think, it looks, my first read of this is, there is something to what Democrats were saying about black voters, not in the Atlanta metro area. We talk about black voters around there. Black voters in rural areas of the state, bringing out bigger numbers there for Democrats than we saw back in November. That's a key ingredient when you're talking about races this close.
Steve, don't go far, because I think we're going to get some more numbers in there, and we are very close in this state. NBC has called the race for Raphael Warnock, having defeated Senator Kelly Loeffler in Georgia. We have not made a call as it relates to the Ossoff-Perdue race. It is close. John Ossoff is leading at the moment, and his lead in the last new results that came in did increase, but it is still too close to call. My guests are sticking around, by the way, and I appreciate that. We're going to go live to DeKalb County in Georgia for